You're going to be taking guided notes on the ecosystem. We're going to go through several different concepts within this entire unit. You should have your guided notes, front and back, similar to what we did last year. The same format. Make sure you listen as well as write down. You can play it, rewind it, pause it, stop it, go back to it, whatever fits you. All right, so the general ecological terminology we're going to be talking about is ecology and biodiversity. So, what is biodiversity? Biodiversity. It's a term that describes the variety of species found here on Earth, terrestrial and oceanic ecosystem. Remember, bio means life, just like the term biology. Okay, diversity means different. So we know those two terms. Put them together. We have a variety of species found here on Earth. So, what is ecology? It is the study of the organisms and their environment, as well as the relationships between the biotic and abiotic factors in an area. Later on in this video, we're going to be talking about the difference between biotic and abiotic factors, but I just wanted you to understand the definition of ecology. So remember, it's the study of the organisms and their environment. Okay, ecosystem, the whole entire environment for that specific organism. We have the community that we live in. Okay. So levels of organization within an ecosystem. Think about a pyramid and the tiers of the levels. So we have the individual, us, the community, a biome, population, ecosystem, and the biosphere. We're going to be talking about these individual key terms, but these specific terms focus on the levels of organization. All right, so the levels of organization within ecology are individual, the population, community, ecosystems, biome, and the biosphere are from smallest to largest. So obviously, we're the smaller thing within the population within our community, okay? And it goes to the largest, which is the biosphere. All right, so individual and the population. Okay, so we have individual who is a single organism within the ecosystem, us, and then we have the population, which is a group of organisms, the same species that live in a particular area. So us, population would be the people the people at the school. Okay, the females, the males. Okay, our community is different populations that are interacting with one another in a given area. So community would be like the Person County. All right. So you have the Roxborough, you have Timberlake, you have let's see, Allensville. I'm just naming a few. You know, I'm not from here, so I just listed some that I could that came off the top of my head. So that's that community. We make up Person County. Then we have our ecosystem, a community and the abiotic factors that affect them. Okay, we're going to talk about abiotic shortly, but just know the difference between the community and the ecosystem. A biome and a biosphere. A biome is a particular type of ecosystem. For example, deserts, the tundra, forests, grasslands, the tropical forest. So that's just to name a few. A biosphere is all of the ecosystems on Earth put together. Okay, so the desert, the tundra, the forest, the grasslands, all put together make up that biosphere. Okay. All right, so our next concept within the ecosystems is interactions within an ecosystem. So we have the producer, the consumer, the decomposer, the herbivore, omnivore, and carnivore. And I know you've heard all these terms before in elementary school, and we briefly talked about them in sixth grade. But we're going to go into deeper part of it and what they actually do for our ecosystem. All right, so a producer is an organism that gets energy by producing its own food using the sun's energy. So that producer produces its own food using the sun, okay? And they get the energy from the way that they produce their food. The consumer, which is us, we're organisms that must get energy from our food, all right? We eat it. We eat, consume. That's the biggest difference, okay? And again, you already know these terms, but we're just going to go into more in depth with them. All right, so the decomposer is the organisms that break down dead plants and dead animals. Just another type of consumer because they rely on outside food sources. So they can't make their own food, okay? So we have the carnivore, the omnivore, and the herbivore. I know these terms came up when you talked about dinosaurs and fossils, which we're going to talk about in our next 2 units later. But a carnivore is a consumer that eats other consumers. Okay, that's where it gets its energy from. It gets energy from eating other consumers. We have an omnivore that it eats with both producers and consumers, and it gets its energy from that. And we have a herbivore that only eats plants for its energy. Okay. We humans are along the lines of omnivores. We eat both the producers and the consumers. Okay. It's competition and predation. So competition is not exactly how the term we use in everyday life, but competition is multiple organisms going after the same food source, either a plant or an animal. And so predation is a carnivorous organism consuming its food, another animal, but not another plant. Okay, so remember, science is all common sense. So the common sense definition of competition, remember, is the multiple organisms going after the same food source, either it's a plant or an animal. Predation is a carnivorous organism consuming its food, another plant, but not another animal. All right, so symbiotic relationships. So it's any relationship between two different organisms. So we have three different types. All right, so we have three different types of symbiotic relationships. We have commensalism, mutualism, and then we also have parasitism. So with three different types: commensalism, mutualism, and parasitism. Those are three different types of symbiotic relationships. So, commensalism is a relationship in which one species benefits and the other is unaffected. Okay, so here's two examples of the water buffalo, and I believe this is some type of whale. Okay. Mutualism is a relationship in which both organisms are benefiting from it. Okay, so you have the bee and the flower. It's fertilizing. It's the pollen is going back and forth. So the flower is benefiting from all that pollen. And then the bee is also releasing their. So mutualism, a relationship in which both organisms are benefiting from it. So here are three examples. You have the clownfish and the sea urchin there. You have the alligator and the bird, and you have the bee and the flower. Parasitism is a relationship in which one organism benefits and the other one is harmed. So this is more of a common sense one. You have, I believe this is a spider and a maggot. You have the fish and the little fish. And then you have the maggots eating looks like a caterpillar on a leaf. So one is benefiting, is eating, is consuming, but it's harming what it's eating. Okay. All right, so factors that are affecting our ecosystem. We have biotic, abiotic, limiting factors, population density, and the carrying capacity. Those are the key terms for this concept. All right, so a biotic factor, any living part of an ecosystem. All right, so it's living, living, biology. That's the easiest way to remember it. So the examples, you have plants, animals, fungi, and bacteria. They're all living, okay? So it's part of our ecosystem. Now we have abiotic. The abiotic factor is any non-living part of an ecosystem that affects the organisms living in this ecosystem. So our temperature affects us. The light, water, soil, and space. Those are examples of non-living parts of our ecosystem, and they are referred to as abiotic factors. All right, so a carrying capacity and population density. All right, so the largest amount that the ecosystem can support. All right, so carrying capacity and population density. All right, so carrying capacity is the largest amount that the ecosystem can support. Okay, it's common sense. Think about capacity has reached its limit. Then you have population density. And that's a measure, it measures the number of individuals of a species in a defined area of a habitat. So the population of Northern Middle School is around 30 students. That's our population of species, that's students in northern middle school. That's our habitat. Okay. Limiting factors. Anything that is restricting or controls the number of individuals in a population. Okay. So like I said, I've been saying science is common sense. Look at the key term, limiting. It restricts the number, or controls the number of individuals in a population. Oh, so back to this example. So an example with Northern Middle School with Southern, if you're out of your district, that's limiting you to come to Northern Middle School if you're out of district. That limits that population for Northern Middle School. Same thing if you're at Southern and you're out of district, that's limiting you from coming to Southern. So it's a little simple explanation of the difference between an example of limiting factors. All right, so how do these abiotic factors affect organisms in our ecosystem? All right, so we have temperature, light, water, and soil. These are things that affect the organisms in our ecosystem. Just remember that, okay? So what could be the impact of changing any of these abiotic or biotic factors? Well, a single factor is changed by population or any natural event that occurs, the whole system can be altered. So imagine a tsunami coming. That's a natural event, and that could possibly harm our population. Okay. Another example, humans can alter events through framing or irrigating. While we usually cannot see what we're doing to various ecosystems, the impact is being felt overall. So cutting down trees, that's harming another environment. That's harming the birds, the species that live in those trees in that environment. We're limiting their environment. Acid rain in certain regions has resulted in the decline of fish population. So just small things can impact living and non-limiting living things, factors. So how can we stabilize? How can we come together to stabilize the ecosystem to be achieved? So if we balance abiotic and biotic factors, the overall balance is achieved and the ecosystem can become stable. Okay, there has to be a common ground somewhere for so it can be completely stable and we can live in a better environment. Okay. All right, so the next concept, we have energy flow within an ecosystem. Key terms with this concept, the trophic levels, autotroph, primary, secondary, and tertiary, heterotroph, and consumers again. So what are trophic levels? It is the feeding position of an organism in a food chain. Some examples, we have primary producers, herbivores, primary carnivores. So remember, they're feeding the position of an organism in a food chain. So there's different trophs, okay? So generally there's two different ones. You have autotroph and a heterotroph. The autotroph, think about automatic, organisms that can produce their own food. And they're also known as producers, like mentioned earlier. Heterotroph, organisms that cannot produce their own food. And we're also called consumers. Okay. So primary, secondary, and tertiary are consumers. So the primary organisms are organisms that eat producers. Then you go up to secondary, this organisms that eat primary consumers. And then you have your tertiary. Those are organisms that eat the secondary consumers. All right, so right here you have this pyramid. You have your primary producers, your primary consumers, and then you have your secondary consumers, and then you have your tertiary consumers. So the greatest number of species, the amount of energy and population size is at our primary producers. And then it decreases as it gets up the pyramid, okay? Make sure you fill in these in your guided notes in your triangle and your pyramid. You may see these again next week, the next week I see you. All right, so heterotrophs and autotrophs. Autotrophs eat mostly plants, and heterotrophs eat everything else. So remember when I mentioned earlier, you all talked about this when you talked about dinosaurs in elementary school. So here's an example. You have herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, and something else that eats everything. Okay, that's the heterotroph. Okay. All right, so a food chain and a food web. So there is a difference. So think about chain. It's a linear diagram that shows the predator and prey relationships among species in an ecosystem. But a food web is interconnected. So imagine a spider web. All right, so it's interconnected food chains showing many different possible food chains within an ecosystem. So there is a difference. Chain is linear, showing the predator and prey relationships. Then you have the food web that's interconnected of those food chains, and it's showing the different possible food chains within the ecosystem. All right. If you have any questions, please ask me later. Make sure you fill in your guided notes. Remember your guided notes, you have front, and you also have the back. All right. Once you have completed your guided notes, you're going to be working on your coach books. We're doing EOG review. Crunch time is here. You're going to be doing chapter 1. We're reviewing the chemistry unit. It's pages 9 through 39. You're reading the information and you're answering the questions in your notebook. There are 2 coach books per table. Okay, those 2 coach books per table. You may share the books. There may be extras left during your class. Then you could possibly have 3 or 4 at your table. Please do not write in these coach books. These are the only ones that I have for the entire 8th grade. When I come back and I see you all the following week, we're going to be doing a food menu in relation to the ecosystems, and we'll be wrapping up this unit shortly. Make sure that you complete your coach books. This will be an EOG review grade. Just do not zoom through it. If you do finish chapter 1, then you need to move to chapter 3 on cells to review the cells unit with microbiology and when we talked about the viruses and pandemic and epidemics. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. I'll be at my email if you need me. Make sure you follow instructions and have a great afternoon and have a great weekend.